And hello from around the world. I visited with the players today, and we kind of talked about this is a tough game, and from some of those games, I thought one of the things that you get from that is growth. And in this game, I thought I used a fighting analogy to say in the first quarter, we definitely got knocked on our ass, and all of a sudden you're on the canvas looking up, and the reminder was the fight wasn't over just because you lost the first round. And there's a lot of resiliency that can go with that. And I thought after the first quarter, I thought the players really did a good job making the adjustments on the game plan that we needed to make. Going in with one plan, thinking it was going to be played one way, and to their credit, they came out in a different way. And I thought the players really did a good job of adjusting to that as fast as the first quarter went. I think there was maybe 7 plays and 2 scores, and I think at the half we might have only played about 16 or 17 plays. But from that point on, I really thought the adjustments were made by the guys, the assistants, and the players especially did a good job adjusting. I thought the second half was wild. It was fun. 4-minute, you have to get the ball back or get a stop, and we did. 2-minute, you cannot allow a score. We did that too. And then the overtime, to get a possession and get a stop, that was a big deal because, as you know, on the second possession, the field goal can win. We didn't end up going that route where we scored, but getting a stop on that first possession is a big deal. And so, like I said, it was a tough game, one that you grow from. And I think you have to be in that environment and to be in those kind of fights to know that, okay, we now know we're never out of the fight. And that's a good feeling to have. But you can't just say it. You have to live it, and you have to go through some of those times. And you have to be almost in the environment to prove it. And yesterday, that was the environment you want. There's, 65,000 people there against you, 2:30 left, you're down 1. All of a sudden, then it's like 2:20 and you're up 4. And so those are like very cool moments to be in as a coach and a player. And so it was a wild game and an unusual start for it for sure for us.
And you mentioned the adjustments working well for y'all. How would you describe what adjustments worked and what you needed to do?
I think changing defensive packages, that was a big piece to it. It was certainly one that they hadn't shown a lot of. And they came out. So from a preparation standpoint, we made some changes and adjusted to how they were going to play and the style they were going to go. And to a credit to New England, I've always felt they've done an excellent job at that. And so we had to adjust, and we did.
In the overtime, I think it was on their 3rd and 3. I think you guys did like a cover 0. I could be wrong in that. When do you go with calling something like that? Obviously, there's huge risk, huge reward.
Yep.
And just what did you think of how the guys defended it?
Yeah, so on that particular one, we actually it ended up being a cover 0. Sometimes the formation may indicate that or how they play. But I think at that time, you got to go and be bold. It's one that, when you practice it a lot, you're in that moment, you can go do that. So I thought we would execute it at that pot, and we did. But getting a stop in the overtime when they had the possession first, I thought that was a big piece of it. They made a good throw and catch on an earlier play. I think it was might have been J.K. that hit the quarterback and made a good catch. And those were, good battles throughout the game. And I had a sense that third down would come down to a good battle again. And certainly one of our most consistent guys with AB, being out on the outside, played good technique too.
How do you account for, or do you even account for, the kind of run that Trevon's on?
Yeah, I don't know if you could. You certainly can't count on it because if it was, it wouldn't be so rare. So one of the things I really admire. We had a good discussion today. So I'd asked him. I said, "How old were you? 10 or 11 years ago?" And he said, 12 or 13. I said, "Well," I've known you for a long time. And so when I was coaching in college at University of Florida, I was recruiting another player, but I met the head coach, Will Muschamp, at Steph's house. And so who was there was young Trey. As a 13-year-old, I was coaching at Florida, and we were recruiting his brother. And so I thought it was only fitting that he and I would end up together many years later on different paths, but it was destined to be. I said, "You didn't know that," and I was really there recruiting you. No, he did. Yeah, he goes, "You," because I didn't know me then. "You were there with Muschamp that night." I said, "Yes." And so we connected about that, and we just had a good time. I'm not answering your question, but it was a good story because I've just followed him. I've known who he was for a long time, so I had special interest in him, and followed his career through Alabama and certainly through the draft process. He was somebody that we followed. But to say you count on it, I wouldn't say that. I'd say just keep pedaling downhill. He's in a good space. He's right where his feet are. I love the accountability that he has. I think you guys probably spoke to him after the game, and he was disappointed on the last play of the game. We were or the last part of the regulation time, and we were in a man-to-man defense, and both he and Kays would be, if you had to, pick a couple of people to play on that kind of, a ball that's, a little bit overthrown, they would be on a list of like 5 guys. They'd be 2 of those 5, and that would come down with the ball. So for that not to happen in that moment was definitely unusual.
Has he joked around with you at all, or brought up you guys not drafting him in Atlanta?
No, he was good. He's a super respectful kid, so he wouldn't. I'm the one that should be bringing that up, so not him.
Was that 75-yard?
Was that 75-yard play? Is that a communication thing between those two? Because both are trying to make a play, and just one guy say, all right, I'll let you do it, I'll stay back, or vice versa?
No, I know how you could think that, but no, there wasn't any miscommunication on it. It was a true man-to-man with a middle field player, and so both of them literally thought they were going to go make the play, and it wasn't a case of I'll take him, you got him. It was just a example of one thought he was going to make it, the other thought they were going to make it. One thought it was going to get overthrown, one undercut it, and it just hit right in the spot. I don't know if we could do it again if we tried. Honestly, it was that unusual of a mishap to go. So that's why I said we're never out of the fight. I was alluding to that earlier, but no, there wasn't a communication error on it. In fact, it's one that we've called plenty of times already, not just in the season. We called it sometimes in that game already. So it wasn't a new call or anything that took extra communication. It was simply a man-to-man defense with a middle field player, and I don't think we could do it again if we tried.
You mentioned Trey being a little bit down about the play. Micah also said he was disappointed with how he played yesterday. How would you assess his game versus the Patriots?
Yeah, and I wouldn't say Trey was down. I think just the accountability for that play, for sure, because he made a fantastic play to go in on the score. I thought he had a good hit on a couple other times. So, sometimes games are just like that, where you're feeling it, you're staying in the moment, but the plays aren't coming to you. And quite honestly, it's one of the things I really respect and admire about Randy so far. So misses the Chargers game, comes back, and I think we played Philadelphia. I think that's who we played his first game back. I thought he was really relentless. He had a couple holding calls. He didn't get to the quarterback, but he caused a number of penalties. In the next game, I think it might have been Carolina, and he had a couple of sacks. And then the next game was, I think, the Giants, and he was still relentless, but didn't have the sacks. And then this game, the same relentless, and had 2 more. So sometimes you can go to try to chase something and maybe do something out of character, or let me try something different because I'm not getting it. But I thought over the last month, he's been so consistently relentless and staying in the approach of doing what he's doing. I think it's a good example for all the players. Like, some days it just doesn't come your way by the nature of the call or the scheme they're using, but if you stay consistent, you stay relentless, you have opportunities when they come. And I think that's one thing I think Randy has really learned through the course of this season. Just stay consistent in your approach, man, and good things will happen, and he's really done that.
The games, when they run a game, Dan, how many times is that up to them? They decide what game to run on their own?
I would say there's a game plan, that goes within the week, and then they execute that in the game, and oftentimes we may make a call, and then if they think it's a pass, okay, I've got the information, a stance, a formation, then they can turn it into a game. So I would say when they call it on the field, I would bet that's probably 80% of the time. And if there's some predetermined ones, then it would come in with the call or from the sideline. So I would say 7 or 8 out of 10 times it would be on their own.
Dan, how diligent is Trey on with film study and preparation? Because he told us after the game on the pick 6, it was something he saw in film,
right.
Double slant on the front side there.
And to his credit, he didn't get a lot of practice reps this past week, with his ankle. So he was able to do a good bit of the work on Friday and a good bit Saturday, but on Wednesday and Thursday, not so much. So a lot of that has to come into that film study. It's one of the positions that can be challenging because you're studying one player so many times. We move him quite a bit, so he'll have to study this player and this player and this player based on where he may align. And so it takes some extra work on his end, but no, it doesn't surprise me to hear that.
Randy Gregory seemed like he was pretty fired up, angry, if you will, by some of the holding and some of the stuff they were doing. And then, he ends up getting the sack. It just seemed like he was playing really well like that. What's the balance, and do you ever have to talk to a player like, hey, try and keep it, tone it down, or do you like seeing that?
I like seeing it. Yeah, I want to be right at the edge of the aggressive nature, and I'm really impressed with him, the way that he's gone about it. You don't want to cross it and lose your poise. You don't want to cross it and maybe get out of your game, if that makes sense. Like, I'm going to go try to do something because of this or that. And so I think staying really consistent in your approach is not an easy thing to learn. And but I thought for him, the last 4 weeks have certainly proven that he's able to stay in the process, and that's a really important part of him playing well. And I think he's captured that.
What is your thought process or game plan for Donovan Wilson just coming back off the injury and wanting to get him some reps?
Yeah, for sure. He's such an impactful guy. It's the speed, the explosion. So for us, coming into the first game, we had, kind of a number that we would be comfortable with him missing the last, 4 games or so. So we kind of were taking him up to a certain spot. So we knew it was going to be a little bit here, a little bit, and then we'll just keep adding to that as we're going. But I was pumped to see him back. And, man, you felt his energy and his toughness to go.
It's a good problem to have, but with 4 safeties, with as much talent as experience as they have, how do you juggle those roles?
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's a good thing. And we've fortunately been able to navigate that, and knowing that we're just going to try to find the strengths of what everybody does and how we can utilize them. Not every situation's played exactly the same. Not every personnel group's played exactly the same. And we'll kind of be into that same space at the defensive line here, hopefully before too long. There's some other guys that we know are on the way back, and Lawrence and Armstrong and Gallimore and Tristan. So those are 4 more to put back into a big rotation. Sooner, than later. But as you go through it, it takes communication for sure, and then finding roles to make sure, hey, everybody wants, a part of the game plan to own, and that'll certainly be, as a coach, one problem I'd take every day of the week.
What was the thought process and how you used Micah on Sunday? It looked like he started outside backer. I don't know if he played it more than the Mike.
Well, we actually referred to that earlier. We did start with him in an outside backer spot based on the packages that we were anticipating getting. And I thought after the first quarter, we really settled down and had to make some adjustments to put him back to a behind-the-ball player. And so that's how we had to feature him more in this game, and then a little bit on some third downs at defensive end. But you're exactly right. You've nailed it on the early part of the game. And I think if it had stayed in that way, he would have stayed, working some outside linebacker and what we call our base defense. And then as we got into playing into our nickel packages, then he moved back behind the ball, and then some third downs he rushed. So it was kind of one of those culminations where he did a little bit of everything. And but that's kind of what the game plan called for based on what they were doing in this game.
He said he wasn't happy with his efforts. On film, was he being too hard on himself?
I think he was. He just wants to impact the game so much, and so we were referring this earlier. You can't force that sometimes. And when the plays come to you, you've got to be able to deliver. And they'll come to you. And I think one of the big lessons we've learned from Randy so far, first game back after he missed the Charger game, he played extremely hard, and against Philadelphia had some holding penalties, but not the production. And the next game against Carolina, he did. Against the Giants, same effort, didn't have the sacks. And in this game, he did. So I think you're not always going to have the production in every game. It'd be nice to do that, but you got to stay consistent in your approach. And so for him, not being able to impact the game, you can sense, frustration or a big hit or a sack or, something that could change the game. And so he has the speed to do that, the quickness to do that. So when you don't, it can be a little, like I'm accustomed to doing that, and I didn't get to do that.
What did you like about what Chauncey was able to do recovering the fumble? And did you learn anything about his instincts that you hadn't already seen?
Well, we liked one that he got it. We got on some of the other guys for some blocking into that spot. I said, we can get Chauncey 55 yards, And so Donovan almost knocked him down, and Randy was celebrating. So we had some fun with it in the meeting rooms about it. But I thought this is a really versatile and smart young player. I think he and Osa are really ahead of the curve in terms of young guys, their maturity, their knowledge to pick things up. And I think as you're going to see Osa, you've seen him grow, and I think you're going to see the same thing with Chauncey, in this next block of games. We really, this was a 6-game block. We got another one coming for about another 6 games. Sometimes use quarters, sometimes use blocks, and so I think we'll see some improvement again with Chauncey on this next lap through.
You've mentioned Tristan several times in the last few weeks. What are your expectations for him?
Well, I thought the quickness that he has inside, that's, him coming out and what I saw. So another interior nickel rusher. And so I'm excited to get him back and Gallimore back and to see what that combination looks like. It's Watkins and Digazua and how do they add to it. And if we get the rotation of those 7 or 8 guys like I think we can, I think that's when we'll be at our best. And we're not there yet, but when we do get to that spot, I'll be excited to see how we can feature those guys.
Following up on that, the run defense, how do you assess where the run defense?
Hold on 1 second, please.
Sorry, how do you assess where the run defense is, and do you see it as part of that work in progress that you were just referring to?
Why we had as much as we did?
Yes, but also in general. Are you happy with the way the run defense is?
I would say there's parts of it that I am, and there's parts of it that I say we still need to improve upon. And I would hope in this next 6 weeks we certainly see that. I certainly feel like we have enough variation of coverages and guys to fit into the runs. In this last game, I didn't like obviously the first play that went for a long one and explosive, but by and large I'm pleased with where we're at. Of going on the run game. I'd just like to see us knock down some of these explosives that happened. Okay, now I'm ready for you on the conference call.
Yeah, sorry about that. Hard to hear mine. Regarding the coverage that you discussed earlier, how as a play caller do you get a feel for when the right time is to pull that out of your bag? And is that something that you've refined over the course of your play calling career?
Yeah, and that's a good question. I would say there's always a moment that you feel to say, okay, this is that time that you've got to go. And you can't just read the next play off the call sheet. Some scenarios call for moments that you got to go, be bolder and take a shot. And that was one of those times to do that. But there's not a method behind it other than just the feel of the game. Sometimes it may be who's in. You may say, okay, they've got a blocking tight end and a back. This is they're going to max protect. That's not the time that you want to go into a zero blitz where they can block guys up. But if there's a down and distance that this is a time to take your shot. You better know when those moments are, and certainly at home it's nice when the crowd's ripping and you're in a 3rd down and 7 or 8 and they can't hardly hear anyway just because of the noise and how loud it is. Those are fun times to bring it to because it adds extra stress onto the quarterback. On the road, you better know this is one you've held on to and it calls for just for that moment and you do it. And sometimes you had something that you practiced during the week and you didn't even get to call it because the right time didn't even come up. So you practice it again the next week in terms that it may come back. And so for us, it just so happened that, in that moment, good time for us to go be aggressive was there.
It seems like players would enjoy that call. It seemed like they would enjoy all going downhill, at least on the pass rush. Are they ever in your ear about like, hey, let's call this. Are they eager for it?
That's one of the good benefits of being in the press box. If I'm on the field, I would definitely be, I got it, all right, I'll call it. But being in the press box, I just, if I need somebody, I'll call it down on the phone. But they don't generally call up to me and say, hey, how about it? So usually the call that I make is the alert. So if I may say it in the installation meeting, if this call comes up, here's when we'll use it. And so there may be a time, just the call alone may mean, okay, this is what Dan's thinking in this spot.
On that note, the
Last one,
feedback
guys.
in the press box, when you're changing packages as significantly as you said you were in this game, how different is that from a communication standpoint in your systems than just a typical play call, and what's that process look like?
It was more challenging because of the fact that so many of the things we had weren't on the call sheet. So I basically, just took a sheet of paper and folded it open and said, kind of put down some ideas and some things. And after the next series, before the coaches got, with the players, these are some calls we're going to feature, and this is how we're going to go about it. And by the time you get into the half, like I said, there was only 16 or 17 plays in the first half defensively, and so we didn't get to do a lot of that after the first 7 didn't go so well for us, so it was a small sample size before we went all together back at the half. And but I said I just got to give the players the credit. They're the ones that have to make the adjustments and the changes. For us as coaches, we have the stuff in the computer, but it's for them to know, hey, we didn't practice this week, but this is how we're going to go about it. All right, you guys have a good one. You're welcome. Safe travels.